Good morning, David.
Good morning, Salim.
David, is risk management an art or a science?
I think this is a false dichotomy, a false separation. And a lot of people spend a lot of time arguing about risk management. It's an art, it's creative, it's unstructured, it's just drawing together a lot of threads and creating some view of the future which didn't exist before. So it's very creative and unstructured, which is art. Or it's about statistics and process and about analysis and rules and so on, principles, and so it's a science. Well, is it true that art is only unstructured and creative? Of course, artists do create something new and they are expressing themselves in a free way, but there is structure to art. There are rules of perspectives. There are ways in which you combine colours. You're restricted by the edges of your canvas or the space for your sculpture, or the length of your music. There's the scale of the music and the notes which you're restricted to. You're combining things in a particular way in order to achieve a creative output. So there are rules and principles that are operating within art, within a structure which is then used creatively. And surely science is also creative and unstructured in research, in theoretical development, in the way that we think about the world. Otherwise we would only ever just incrementally improve what we currently have. There would never be any new discoveries. So for risk management, I think it's important that we see it's an art and a science, or if we want to use that language, or it's a blend of the creative and the unstructured and the analytical and the structured. And the difficult thing, I nearly said the art, or the challenge for the risk professional is to blend those two things together in an appropriate way and to know when to choose. Now is a time to put the rule book to one side, to put the processes and the tools here, and to think freely, and to encourage people to say anything, to have a completely unstructured view of there's no rules, no right or wrong, you tell me what you think. And then they need to know when is the time to say, okay, let's put some boundaries around this. Let's try and analyze what we have, see if anything is missing, see if we can spot any patterns, and to do some more scientific or technical analysis. When is it time to be just completely creative? And when is it time to be more analytical? When is it time to be unstructured? And when is there time to be structured? And I see the risk process as a kind of a switch between the two. So we start by being quite structured in our planning when we think about the risk management process, how we're going to apply it, what the scope of the process is, what tools and techniques we're using, the level of resource we require, the frequency of our reviews. All of these things are structure for the risk management process, the approach we're going to use. Then we come to risk identification and it's more creative. So then and there are rules for the techniques we use, of course, but we're opening the door to say, think of anything, any bad things that might happen, any good things that might happen. Let's be creative. And then we assess those things and we come back into some structure. And we say we want to prioritize them against a common framework, against a common assessment grid. And then we're going to have some rules that say these are big ones and these are small ones. Then we come to response planning and we open up again and say, let's be creative in thinking about alternative ways of responding to our threats and opportunities, and think of new responses. We talked about innovation in the risk management process and innovating in our risk identification and response planning steps. And so here too we're going to open the doors to creativity and unstructure. Then we structure as a result of our response planning phase and finish up with a set of actions. Each action has an owner. Each action has a timeline, it has a resource and budget requirement, it has completion criteria, so that we can monitor the performance of our agreed responses and actions. And then we get back into structure again. So you'll see that the risk management process is kind of oscillating between creativity and analysis, between free form and structure. And it's a constant iteration, a cycle between those things. So to ask, is it an art or a science, I think is an artificial division. Yes. And it's more helpful to say that we draw aspects of both in the way that we understand and manage risk.
If that means or this is reflected to anyone who wants to be a risk professional.
Yes.
So it's not necessary, for example, to be a scientist or or having a technical background. Those with the humanities, for example, or arts also can be risk managers.
Yes, we talked about the competencies, core competencies
Yes.
of a risk professional. And I think thing is, if you come from a technical or scientific structured background, you will need to learn how to relax and be creative and unstructured and to allow people to flow and to make mistakes and to try things, because you're used to being structured by a process and rules and principles and being in that sort of technical world. If you get somebody who comes from the world of innovation or entrepreneurship or the media or from marketing or somewhere where people are a little bit more creative, they come to the risk world, they will need to have to learn to be a bit more structured and how to apply the analytical processes, because the good risk professional has both of those skills available to them. So I know how to dream and to help other people dream about the future and what might be, but I also know how to do statistical regression analysis and to work out what is more likely and what is not, and to do my Monte Carlo simulations, and to know when is appropriate to do which. So it doesn't mean that technical people can't be risk specialists. They can, if they can also open up that softer side. And it doesn't mean that creative people can't be risk specialists, as long as they learn how to do the more analytical side. It's very rare to find a fully rounded person who can do all of those things straight away. I started as an analyst,
Yes.
and I came from a scientific background, as you do.
Yes.
And so for me, it was easier to do those processes and analytical parts. And then I had to learn maybe 5 years later about the people side and have coaching and colleagues who were skilled in those areas to help me to develop my softer skills, my interpersonal skills. And I still need to some help sometimes to remember, to focus on those sides too.
Are there competencies well developed for risk professionals, like other fields, for example?
Yes, we touched on that in an earlier couple of questions about the competencies of an effective risk professional and the ways in which we can develop those. So that's certainly true, and they do, the ones that exist, which are produced by the professional bodies largely, are sets of personal characteristics as well as sort of technical skills. So my personal way of thinking about competence, which I developed with a colleague 20 years ago, we call it PEAKS, P-E-A-K-S, 5 things which contribute to being a competent risk specialist. And just quickly, P is for personal characteristics, the sort of character, the sort of person you are. E is for experience. You have to have done certain things to know how to approach uncertainty in an experienced way. A is for attitudes, the choices that we make about the way we position ourselves in relation to other people, in relation to risk, in relation to facilitation and process. K is for knowledge, and S are for skills. So knowledge is what we know, and skills are how we use it. And I think an effective risk professional has the right personality, has relevant experience, has made good choices about their attitudes, has broad knowledge and deep skills. And under each of those headings, what we've done in our practice is to define a set of competencies for each of those 5 areas.
I cannot resist really not asking this question.
Please, feel free.
Where is multidisciplinary characteristics or team comes into risk management?
Yes, that's a great question. Teams are made up of individuals, of course, and often resources are limited, so organizations can only afford to employ 1 or 2 or 3 risk specialists. And so we often do end up working in isolation, which is a real shame, because we have our special focus, our particular skills, our perspective on things, and it's really important to broaden that with the views of other people. So of course multidisciplinary teams are important, male and female, young and old, engineers and creatives, all of these different, maybe from different nationalities, really helpful to make sure that we have a broad perspective on risk within a team. If we're talking about a risk team, That might be helpful that our risk team is balanced, but how often do our whole team go together to support somebody and facilitate a process? Usually we go out one at a time.
Yes.
So for risk specialists who are usually operating alone when they're working with clients or customers or people in their organization, it's more important that we are well-rounded, even though our team, there may be those skills available elsewhere in the team, we ourselves at least need to have access to the full range of skills.
Interesting. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you. Thank you.